Good evening and welcome to the Old Colony Budget Subcommittee meeting of October 28th, 2020. Tonight's meeting will be live streamed on Facebook at the Old Colony Facebook page. Tonight we are joined by Budget Subcommittee members, Maurice Saint-Amand, who is the Budget Subcommittee Chair, Shirley Burke from the town of Rochester, who is our School Committee Chair, Robert Marshall representing the town of Lakeville, Dick Gamache representing the town of Mattapoisett, Don Williams, representing the town of Carver, Sarah Griffith, who is our business manager, Jolene Costa, secretary to the school committee and assistant to the superintendent director, and I am Aaron Polanski, superintendent director. At this point in time, I would like to turn the meeting over to our chair, Maurice Saint-Amand from the town of Acushnet.
Good evening. Call the meeting to order. I guess we're going to have to dispense with the Pledge of Allegiance because I don't have a flag in my truck. And I'm going to just turn it right over to Sarah.
Thank you. Can everyone hear me okay?
Yep.
Yes.
Great. So tonight, I'm asking that we come back together and discuss the FY21 budget, as well as its various funding sources. The hopes of this is to make a decision to finalize the funding sources and assessments for our member towns. So two handouts that were distributed today are a revised assessment sheet for fiscal year 21 member towns and a breakdown of our budget. I'd like to just start by saying the revised budget hasn't changed from the vote that was taken in March, both by our school committee and in our public hearing. So the revised budget, the total amount is the same. The revenue sources being considered are the offset of non-resident tuition from Freetown, Chapter 70 funding, which is distributed and reflects what was distributed in the administrative update by DESE in August. So that is that $3,282,354, which is level funded from last year. The next piece of revenue that I would like the committee to consider for a final vote is the transportation reimbursement aid. We did hear business managers in a recent DESE Zoom meeting for the end of year report heard that the hope is that the transportation reimbursement will be funded at 70%. So I'm using 70% for an estimate. However, the final budget has not been set as of this time. So we are still sort of waiting for that to happen. I do think that 70%, I'm hoping that that will happen only because it's sort of like a hold harmless. That would be keeping us at what we've been at, for the past couple of years. Although last year we did get the 82% reimbursement, which is one of the reasons we have a significant amount of money to use to offset our revenue sources in the transportation reimbursement revolving fund that the district set up. So two things happened in FY20. The first is that we received significantly more funding in transportation reimbursement aid. That was because FY19, there was a little bit more money available and they split the funding between FY19 and FY20. So we had an additional $96,000 that we received in FY20 that we can use towards and should use towards a revenue source for FY21's budget. The second piece that occurred is the district school committee voted in the spring, maybe late spring, to allow unspent appropriated transportation funds to be reserved in the transportation revolving account to be used towards offsetting future appropriation. Our school district entered into agreement with our transportation company to pay a percentage of our contract. We had about $120,000 remaining unspent appropriated transportation funds from FY20 that then closed to the revolving account to be used towards offset for FY21. So initially, we were going to use approximately $130,000 from that transportation revolving account, which is our beginning balance on the account. That's what we were going to use for FY21. I did not expect that the district was going to receive, number one, 82%, and number two, obviously, that COVID was going to happen. So with those two events happening, it increases the $130,000 that we were going to spend by approximately $160,000. I am asking that the committee consider leaving a small amount of money in the fund just in case. So I don't want to deplete the entire fund. And so I'm leaving approximately $50,000 in the transportation revolving fund just in case something were to happen, because that fund, again, can be used towards offsetting our transportation expenses. So, when we look at that budget breakdown sheet and we sort of look at those different revenue sources, we can see that the total dollars assessed to the member towns that I'm presenting is $6,971,075. That flows over to the revised member town assessment sheet that was distributed. The minimum local contribution, which is the first line on that sheet, has been updated to reflect the administrative update that took place. The towns of Acushnet and Lakeville saw almost a $50,000 increase in their minimum local contribution. Carver and Mattapoisett both had approximately $34,000 increases in minimum local contribution, and Rochester had a very small increase in minimum local contribution, only about $90. So, yes.
Can I interrupt you for just a second?
Yes.
Before we go to the second sheet, can I ask you a question on the first sheet?
Absolutely.
Can you explain to me, because I've got the voted budget and the applied funds, which I know were estimates.
Mm-hmm.
But why for transportation reimbursement aid is there a variance from what we had initially of $100,000?
Yes, because so in FY20, the school district didn't pay the contractor the same amount of money as what I would have estimated in March. Let's just go back even further, right? Because we start the budget in like December. We talk about, numbers at the end of January. When we talk about those numbers, I have normally in the past used the amount of money that we would spend on regular day transportation. And I would take 70% of that amount of money. That was about $120,000 less at the end of June. So basically what's happening, Shirley, is the amount of money that I thought we were going to receive in transportation reimbursement from the state in FY21 got closed to the transportation reimbursement revolving account. And I'm asking the committee to use those funds from that account instead. Basically to make up the difference in the aid that we're not going to receive because we didn't spend the funds on transportation last year.
So that if you take that 120 to that 354, we're slightly higher than the 255 you were projected.
Yes.
Got it. Okay. Thank you. Sorry about the interruption.
No, it's okay. Please ask away. I don't want to get too far away from things because then we forget we have questions. Okay. So if we head back over to the assessments, I have plugged in everything from DESI on the first line, minimum local contribution, the state's assessment of the town's ability to pay. The remainder of the operating budget, statutory method, the capital and debt spending is in accordance with our agreement. And so we come to sort of the bottom line that shows the difference between the revised assessment that I'm proposing the school committee take to vote and the amount that was certified in March by the school committee. And I just showed on that sheet the change from the certified amount to the revised amount. So you can see which towns are a little bit less and a little bit more. The total differential is a decrease of $40,000 on the assessment. So I think it's really important to state that for our comparison purposes, I am taking the amount that we certified in March and I'm comparing it to the amount that we're proposing discussion for today. I am not taking into account, and I did not want to bring into the mix right now what towns voted, because that makes things kind of confusing. I really want the focus to be on what do we certify in March? You know, what are we discussing certifying today? What are the reasons for what we're discussing right now? The main reason is that we had more transportation reimbursement revenue in FY20 than what was budgeted. And so therefore those funds are available to use. Does anyone have any questions about the assessment sheet?
Yes, Sarah.
Somebody else go.
Sarah, you and I have talked about this, but I just want to get it on the record, so to speak. For Lakeville, under revised assessment, the 1,997,897 is the figure, not the figure that Lakeville voted at town meeting, correct?
Yes.
Which was more. So and the reason that's increased, the 1,997 from the 1,988, is largely because of the increase to Lakeville in the minimal local contribution, correct?
Yes, absolutely.
Okay. Thank you. So you're asking for us to approve for Lakeville 1,997,897, correct?
Yes, I'm coming to the subcommittee to ask for approval to bring forward to the full committee. And I did check on this MGL. We do have to revote, even though we're not changing the budget. It's very important that we get on record in full committee the vote of the revenue sources as well as the assessment per town, and that we send certified letters to our member towns so that they can do their appropriate work on their end, which is that they have a amount of notice time if they need to hold meetings again. In this case, I did check. None of these amounts in our assessment sheet that we would consider to vote are more than what the member towns voted. So each one of these assessment amounts is less than what the member towns voted. But I wanted to focus on what we certified so that we didn't get too cloudy.
Sarah, question for you though, as I'm looking at it, one of the other reasons for the difference in Lakeville is that you have a slight change in enrollment numbers. And could that be what's driving Lakeville as well?
Well, Lakeville definitely has a higher per pupil.
And originally we had 126 kids, and this exercise shows 128. So you've had a slight shift. So originally we had 126 kids. But I'm looking at the old one, yep. Because you got a shift in Carver, a shift in Lakeville. Carver went down, Lakeville went up. Mattapoisett stayed the same, and Rochester went up. But it's not detrimental to Rochester. I'm just curious, is that part, you're picking up 2 more kids? In Lakeville, you would have assumed. Yeah,
absolutely. So I am using the numbers that were in the administrative update distributed by DESE. So I would actually have to look back and see if those changed from, they must have changed, because it has 129 students for Acushnet, 93 students for Carver, 128 students for Lakeville. Mattapoisett is at 2. plus 2. I'm sorry, Mattapoisett is not 2, 36.
Mhm.
And Rochester's at 81. So this does reflect the enrollment that Dusty, yes, so that would be a shift for sure, absolutely.
But as it's explained to Lakeville, that could be a reason that you could also use, because the number of students has changed. And accordingly, a couple more students, a little bit more of the pie.
Yeah, so in addition, it's very interesting. Lakeville has the same number of students at Old Colony like that Acushnet does, but their minimum local contribution is, $200,000 higher. So I do think that their minimum local contribution increases at a higher rate than some of our other member towns, based on Massachusetts' evaluation of the town.
And while I'm not going to dispute that, because all of the towns got an increase in the local contribution, I was surprised to see a couple of that there wouldn't be another town that was paying a higher assessment, or their assessment would not have changed to a higher number as Lakeville's did.
Yes, I would agree. I would agree with that.
So just for my purposes, I would say it's more to the student than to the minimum contribution.
Yeah, but surely we're only talking about an increase in Lakeville of 1 student
Two
from
students.
the 126 to 127. Are you comparing to last year?
No, I'm comparing it to what we had voted, the paperwork
March.
that we had voted in March.
But that's a difference of 1 student?
2 students.
Well,
Two.
Because
I have,
unless I have 126 on the paperwork. I have originally 129 in Acushnet, 82 in Carver, 126 in Lakeville, 36.
And that's from the voted meeting?
That's from the proposed member town assessments. Because I can hold mine up. I pulled out my
Your book.
I went looking for it today because I wanted to compare the two.
Okay.
And that's why I was surprised.
Yes, I do know that there was
Because we had instead of the current one that you're looking at that you just did has an enrollment of 467. The
Yep.
one that we did in March, the 10/1/2019 enrollment was 265.
oh,
say 265 or 465?
I'm sorry, 465.
465.
Okay.
I mean, it could very well be that we have, and Aaron and I would have to talk this through, that we have students that are within the town but are attending other vocational programs within a different school. But we could look into it if we need to.
Yeah,
I will
Sarah,
say,
would you check on that and let us
Sure.
know?
sure.
I'm sorry,
will
Sarah,
see-
for wading through the weeds, but as
It's
we're
okay.
talking about increases, it would seem logical that if a town picks up 2 kids from where we were in March, that would also, to some extent, be a rationale for an increase in assessment.
Yeah. I know Bob and I spoke this afternoon. He had some more questions and we sort of got into a little bit more detail. I will say that Lakeville did vote a significantly higher assessment than what was certified to them. So they actually
You're in a good place.
won't even, it won't, it's still less than what they brought to town meeting in the summertime. So
Out of the increase from what we certified for Lakeville in March to what we're revising to now, we're only, if we're talking about an additional 2 students, the minimum local contribution. If we're talking about 2 students, we're talking about 45,000 of that 1,416, of that extra 200,000 or thereabouts. So yes, 2 students would make about $45,000 worth of difference. Am I right, Sarah?
yep.
Okay.
Yep.
Yeah, which we still want
Yeah.
to chase down whether the one 27 is an accurate enrollment.
Well, what I do have to use for what we're doing here, I have to use what DESE puts on their Chapter 70 complete workbook that's available on the Department of Education. That's what I use when I populate these numbers. So it could be that when we were doing that work, we were using preliminary numbers, but if DESE says it's 128 students in Lakeville, even though they didn't release those numbers until August, then unfortunately that's what we have to go with. But we can look into it more and get more detail for sure.
Sarah, didn't you have a problem earlier on this year with a student that was either charged to the wrong town? I thought it was a Acushnet. And I'm not sure if it was charged to one and not charged to the other, but there was a one student question in there.
We did have an issue with the non-resident tuition billing. There was one Freetown student that was counted as they weren't a Freetown student. They were counted as a Freetown student, but they actually belonged to a different town. And that was something that would change these numbers for sure. So it could be, I'm not sure though, Mr. Polanski, if you're there, I'm sorry, I'm not even looking at my screen. You're there.
I believe it was a student who was actually approved by the school committee to continue at Old Colony despite having moved out of district for their senior year. So I don't even know that student would have impacted our member towns. I think it only impacted the tuition for non-residents, if I'm correct. Again, I don't have that paperwork in front of me.
Will we receive Chapter 70 for that student? I feel like when you looked into this, the state said we would.
I believe we received Chapter 70 for the student, but that's obviously only the Chapter 70 money.
Okay.
And again, I would want to verify that just to make sure I'm not speaking out of turn. So
Yeah, we can do a little bit
I'll put an
more research on it.
asterisk next to that comment.
Okay, thank you.
Guess if we've got a break here, there was a pamphlet that came in the mail today to me from the Department of Education, and it had a breakdown on the budget. I don't know if you've looked at that or if that affects anything we're doing here or not, but it gave Chapter 71 and Chapter 70 in Baker's final budget. So I don't know if you've seen that at all.
They did release some
I'm sorry.
information. They released some information to Aaron and I, and we did look at it, but they're giving you sort of a big picture overview. So, for instance, one of the things that is being said is, that there was a 2% increase in Chapter 70, but not for us. So Old Colony at the local level is being level funded with last year. There are some other towns and regional school districts that aren't at their foundation budget, and those may have received small increases in Chapter 70 this year. But of course, it's, Baker's budget, it has to get approved. So we're all just kind of waiting to see what happens next.
Okay.
Are there any other questions or concerns about bringing forward revised member town assessments to the full committee for consideration?
Well, I'd like to get some final clarification as soon as we can on what the actual enrollment for Lakeville is. Whether it's 126, 127, or 128.
Okay.
Can we vote on this tonight and amend it at a future point if need be?
Yes, absolutely.
Sarah, can I ask a question?
Yes.
At the end of the day, I know we have to take the formality of the votes, but We have already received the first installment on the assessments from our towns.
Yes.
What will happen is that however many assessment, are they paid quarterly?
Yep,
Twice a year?
they're paid quarterly. The
So,
percentage changes depending on the time in the year, per our regional agreement.
so that the change to the budget and the assessments would then be recorded for the last payment in the assessments?
Yes.
So we wouldn't anticipate where Lakeville actually budgeted more than what they had been assessed. Once we are confident in the numbers for Lakeville, none of this should be a problem for any of the towns. It would be, thank you very much, you're giving us a little bit of money back.
Yes.
Well, we're not giving it back. We're not asking them to spend it.
We're not asking them for it, right?
Unless
We're
they want you to
basically,
volunteer it.
yeah, recertifying our assessment based on our revenue sources for last year, in order to build a responsible budget for FY21 and be able to move forward.
Can I ask a question about next year, though? The reliance on so much of the transportation money, okay, from that revolving fund, what does that do? I know it's premature, and I
Sure.
apologize for asking about
It's okay.
FY22's budget so soon, but what will that do for FY22?
So let's talk about the process. Our regional transportation expense is and will increase as a function of our contract with our contractor for student in their bid. With our regional transportation expense increasing and regional transportation reimbursement staying pretty close to 70%, I do foresee going forward the regional transportation reimbursement increasing as well. Just as a sheer function of what you spend, you get reimbursed on. This year is a big question mark because we don't know if regional school districts are asking right now. We're not sure if the commissioner and the state of Massachusetts are going to extend the Mass General Law that was put into place in the late spring, early summer in order to pay contractors for continuity of services. So we're sort of all, again, waiting to hear. Are we paying contractors for continuity of services? Right now, our buses are running a little bit different than they were. You know, we're hoping we stay in session and stay in school and the buses keep running. So there's a lot of question marks. However, I do like to just follow the general idea, which is that our prices have increased. If transportation reimbursement stays the same, our transportation reimbursement should increase to follow that.
But what about the money that we potentially use as an offset, Sarah? That revolving fund. Was this an extraordinary year for us to use offset from the transportation?
Yes,
Okay.
yes, because we didn't pay our contractor in March, April, May, and June. So we had that, $120,000 remaining in appropriation to use towards offset of the fact that we're not going to receive reimbursement we planned on or we hoped for because we didn't spend as much money last year. I do believe it will all come full circle again when we start to talk about FY22, because, FY22, the question will be, what's the total transportation expense for FY22 per our contract? And in FY21, what do we hope to spend on transportation in FY21, and what's 70% reimbursement of that? So it's I think it will all, it's basically just shifting the funds we thought we were going to spend and pay to first student, and instead we're using it as a revenue offset this year.
Okay, thank you.
Madam, Mr. Chair, Mo, if I might, to Sarah, actually not to Sarah, to everybody, and I guess more or less to the public who may or may not be watching this. I think it's very difficult for any school administration and the school committee to, this late in the date, hit a moving target. there's nothing we're going to be able to do about it, but other than to be aware of how challenging it is to be dealing with this year's budget. Here we are almost into November. It's very, very difficult, I think. And to have these transfers and changes, from the certified in March to revised here in October, I'm sure it's very difficult for the administration to keep track and to deal with all of this stuff. And I think the public should be aware of it. Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay. All right. Now, at this point, I guess we need to have a vote to bring this to the full committee to be voted on for these changes on this FY21 revised member town assessments dated 10/28/2020.
I'll make that motion.
Second.
Second. Thank you. All those in favor? Going to take a roll call, Aaron?
Aaron, you muted.
You're muted. You want to
Bo
take a roll
Saint-Amand?
call? Yes.
Sure. Shirley Burke,
Yes.
Dick Gamache,
Yes.
Bob Marshall,
Yes.
John Williams.
Yes.
Motion passes 5-0.
Thank you. Any other discussion? You guys did good. You kept it in a half hour. I still got 15 minutes.
Oh, you're not quite done yet, Mo. I have a question for you. Actually, it's a question for Sarah. When are we going to be at a point, Sarah, to talk about FY22?
Oh, soon.
I know, I hear you,
Soon.
feel your pain.
If the subcommittee would like, you want to pick a date in November and we can start talking about FY22 just as a subcommittee. I'm happy to do that. I'll still be waiting for the departments to hear back from them, but we can take preliminary look at enrollment and some estimates for next year.
To be honest with you, Sarah, I think the sooner the better, so that we will know whether there's an elephant in the room. With the shifts in enrollment, I think the quicker we can inform the towns most impacted by that, the better. I know we won't have numbers, but if we do, a projection of a budget increase or something like that,
Sure.
we can at least do an exercise and understand where we may be. And
That
then
sounds
as
good to
the
me.
season plays out.
Yes.
Well, if I may, I that's not a problem for me, but I think we should just be aware there are a number of components or elements of the budget we wouldn't know, mostly from the state, and I don't think we can know any kind of projection on enrollment for next year, can we? At this,
You already have your new.
Oh,
your
that's right.
October one.
10/1 of this year.
Yes. So we'll use 10/1 of this year. And if the
Yep.
subcommittee is okay with it, I would suggest level funding Chapter 70, 70% reimbursement on what a projected FY21 expense would be for transportation. And then we can talk a little bit about how we would arrive at an estimate for minimum local contribution. Basically, I would take this year's numbers for minimum local contribution per town or per pupil per town multiplied by their enrollment for the new school year. That's how I would start for minimum local contribution, just to break it down to a per pupil and extrapolate it over the number of pupils in the building. We can do that. We can be very conservative and still have a conversation about it if everyone's comfortable with that.
Yeah, that's good. Thanks.
So one thing that
That'd be fine.
we might want to know is the ongoing expense now of the computers and the servicing of the computers. It seems to me when I'm signing checks, there's a fair amount of money that are annual contracts now.
Yes.
And they're relatively expensive that we haven't seen in
We
other budgets.
did You're right. You're right. We did, as a result of the cyber occurrence in February, increase our contracted services for our servers and firewall. And currently, those amounts are being charged to the part-time person that we put in the schedule to help our IT department, help Mr. O'Neill. And so we can have that conversation, absolutely, and discuss our contracted services.
Okay.
Sarah, I promise one last question, and it will be the last one.
Okay.
Are you getting any kind of reassurances from the state? Last year, how late the minimum contributions came out seemed to be an aberration, because I don't ever remember having minimum contributions so negatively impact the budgets that were already voted. Because if I'm not mistaken, they came out like in August or something.
Yes,
which
in
is
August.
quite ludicrous when you think about it. Has there been either an explanation of why it came out so late, or at least a promise that won't happen again? And Aaron's smiling, so I'm going to guess
No.
Okay.
No. I have my own thoughts about the why.
Okay, I won't ask you to share them right now, but
I think the hardest part for me when I stop and think about what the state was trying to do or had to do was that none of our towns had been able to hold their annual town meetings yet. And without that vote in annual town meeting from their taxpayers, I'm not actually sure that the state could set a minimum local contribution because there was no revenue source guarantee. But that is just my hypothesis. No one told me that.
But it's still to some extent, putting the cart before the horse when you're asking your regional school committees to go ahead and vote their budget so that the towns can be ready. And yet, it's this catch-22 that once you do that, oh, by the way, we may change the assessments on you, or we're going to change the minimum contributions. And there isn't a nature of hold harmless any of these communities that were impacted.
I'm hoping that by January, by the time we would normally see the end of January, by the time we'd normally see, preliminary Chapter 70 numbers and minimum local contributions, that we'll know more and have more information. But we don't even currently, there's no approved FY21 budget for the state of Massachusetts. So.
Okay. Everybody all set? You're done, Charlie?
Yes, Mo, I'm all done. Thank you very
All
much.
set.
Thank you for all coming. The meeting is adjourned.
Okay.
Thank you for your time, everybody.
Nice job, Sarah.
Thank you.
Thanks, Sarah.